The manhwa begins, our heroine stands frozen, a flash of terror crossing her face in an instant. A man waits on the ground, clutching his injured arm while she ponders on how deep his wound is and how if it had been a little deeper, his arm would have been gone. She doesn't pity him since he tried to harass her after all, but, the one who saved her of all people, is the one who ruined her life. The one who threw her into a pit of hell and enjoyed it, the one who was dazzlingly lovely in her youth. The monster. Gisker. Her heart pounds faster, each beat harder and clearer as she wonders why he's there again. She thought this time would be different, she thought she had resisted fate with all her strength and escaped. Behind Gisker a man called out, warning him to get hold of himself. Instead he shot him a cold glare as he clarified that was for harassing his wife. She froze again, her mind went blank, did he just call her his wife? Does he know how hard she tried not to marry him, that monster? And now, she has to live by that monster's side again. You want me to live in that hell again? Finally she decided she wouldn't take it anymore, she called out his name and he turned to her in shock. The scene before him, one he would never have imagined, she held a knife to her neck and a painful smile etched on her lips as she declared that she would rather face death than marry him. Something inside him stirred and he instinctively yelled for her to stop, letting his sword drop to the floor as he chased after her calling her name, but her mind was already made. Holding the blade to her neck, she laughed at the irony of the situation, he always calls her that. And, in that kind of situation. Just like back then too, he surely said, no, Diana. Please, God. Anne. You probably don't know that this is my second suicide. My desperate attempts to escape from a monster named you. Are you guys hooked, or nah? The first life of Diana Brienne began in a rather ordinary way. She was the eldest daughter and legitimate child of the Brienne ducal household that earned the trust of the king of the Farnborough kingdom. She was called the number bride of the Farnborough kingdom. Thanks to her noble bloodline and her gentle nature with flawless personality. Looking outside the window, the thought that it was only because she lost her mother so young she had no choice but to grow up quickly. Being surrounded by people all day is exhausting, but still, her heart yearns for the ducal estate, precisely, him. Upon her arrival she goes to him, Gisker. He turns to greet her and upon noticing his bruised lips she instinctively increases her pace. She grabs his face asking if the mansion people had hit him again. He begs her to let go, warning that she'll get her hands dirty if she touched a slave, but she was quite strong-headed. Instead she asked how he could say that, insisting everyone is still the same human being. She continued adding that it's what her mother always told her, in a world where they live together, it's only natural for people to show kindness to one another. He's left speechless by her words, but before he can dwell so much on them she calls out to him asking in disbelief if he was struck in the same place again. The next minute she pulls his shirt open and then lets out a sigh after noticing there are no infected wounds. She runs her hand along his scars, wondering what crime the child could possibly have committed. Gisker was once a slave who her father had brought into the ducal mansion. He was often bullied, even by the servants, because he's the lowest rank in the household, and all she could do was secretly sneak him medicine and meals away from others' eyes. With a final sigh of resignation, she thinks it would have been better if her father hadn't brought Gisker there as a slave and instead left him neglected. Suddenly his voice snaps her out of her thoughts. She apologizes, and as she puts his shirt back together she informs him she wouldn't be able to visit his quarters that night. He responds with a dry, understood. Although it's a little disappointing, she asks if he isn't disappointed that she can't come, asking him to at least pretend to be sad, but he simply responds saying they'll be seeing each other the next day after all. That night, she quietly slipped into his quarters. She knelt beside him, forcing a smile as she quietly admitted that she also wants them to see each other again the next day. Gisker, my complete possession that I can protect, my life, my sanctuary. She reminisces on the time she first met him at 12 years old, up until now, a full 4 years, for her it was a time filled with previous memories. But for him she can't deny that it must have been nothing but a time of humiliation and pain, because everyone in that household abused him. For Gisker, this place must have been no different from hell. He wasn't exactly kind to her, but thanks to him she was able to endure a lonely life. She placed a soft kiss on his cheek to express her thanks to him, and then she left, leaving him the last gift she'll give him. That dawn, Gisker left the Brienne ducal estate. If she had known that the one who left would return one day to destroy her world. The morning after Gisker left, her father was furious that someone had stolen the seal to unlock the restraints from his room and set his slaves free. The maids whispered amongst themselves about how the Duke had never gotten so angry before, while she prayed to God to send his golden dragon to protect Gisker. She lifted her gaze to the sky, offering a soft prayer in her heart, for her mother to protect Gisker, for her to protect her precious person. And 4 years later, the Rodbrook army invaded Farnborough. An informant arrives with grim news, that the Count, Rilkos, who'd been defending the border, had surrendered, which only meant the Rodbrook army will arrive soon. He took his leave shortly after delivering the news, and her sister, taking advantage of the opportunity, quickly shot to her feet, her voice filled with frustration as she suggested they run away too. She brought up their father and brother, who had already gone down to the territory, asking why they're still there. However, and simply called her back. Keeping calm, she explained that it was only natural for the head of the family and heir to preserve their lives. Her hands trembled as she continued, asking that they don't think of it as running away. After that silence followed, her sister spoke again. This time she only told her she'd paid the servants like she instructed, adding that those who wanted to leave the capital had already left the previous day. She was distraught over those that still chose to stay behind. They met the wrong master, and now the end of their loyalty has become death. Hearing her words, her sister couldn't resist speaking. She turned around and admitted that was why she was insisting they leave the capital at once, asking who would acknowledge them for that and if her sister was really a fool. But Anne didn't waver. Instead she noted the obvious. Even so, she was still standing by her side. Her sister opens her mouth to speak, but before a single word can form, an explosion tears through the capital, shaking the ground beneath them. A flicker of panic stirred in her eyes. Talon, the capital of Farnborough Kingdom, has finally begun to burn. As if that wasn't enough, their door burst open. Without hesitation she flew before her sister, standing protectively, but to her utter shock, as the sword dragged on the palace floor, and a man with stained armor walked in, she got to see her precious person again, but this time with not much warmth in his eyes. Gisker. She called out in disbelief, asking if he was really the one. The fear in her heart dropped and she hurried to him, asking why he was there, with that appearance, asking if he'd gotten caught in the war by chance. Her lips curled into a smile and her cheeks turned red as she asked with excitement if he'd perhaps come to save her, but instead he repeated her question with a mocking chuckle, like he found her naivety amusing. Can't you tell just by looking at me? The color drained from her face the minute she found Prince Fernando laying on the floor. She turned back to him in horror, managing only a single, "What?" Before his unexpected confession came, he was actually the one who started the war. The next minute one of his knights arrives with a report, they've captured all members of the Farnborough royal family. However, the fiancé of the lady he'd mentioned separately, he gently notes that it seems he's handled it himself. She stood there overwhelmed by the sudden realization. Gisker was actually the hidden prince who defeated the poison dragon Fafnir. The newly crowned king who ascended to the throne upon his return. The one who led the vanguard of that war. The hero king of Rodbrook. She stumbled backwards in shock, asking how he could do that. However, before she could process anything, he snatched her face, then with a sickening smile declared that he was there to throw her into hell. With a mocking chuckle he confessed that he never forgot for a single minute how she trampled on him. So, just like she trampled on him, he will also trample on her and thoroughly crush that household. Later, she sat alone in the bedroom wondering why she wasn't dragged to the prison with her family. Her mind helplessly shifted to her father and brother, if they were okay, and Alexa, if she was also captured, only for her door to suddenly swing open. It was Gisker, but he wasn't there to reminisce on old times. Instead he informed her the execution date for the Duke and heir of Brienne had been set. Her body gave out and she dropped to the floor, pleading for them to be spared, but he didn't say a word. And when he did speak, his words burnt with mockery as he remarked that it was simply amusing, for the lady to personally kneel before a man who was a lowly slave, retorting that she must have abandoned her pride a long time ago. He stepped forward mentioning how they even tried to leave her behind as a shield and escape abroad, and yet she was before him, asking him to spare them, and she confirmed it with a firm yes. The corner of his lip stretched into a grin as he asked with a smile if he did that what she would give him, asking what she, a young lady from a ruined noble family, can possibly give. She bit her lips trying to hide her shamelessness. The last bit of restraint in her broke and she got up and declared herself, she will offer herself to him. She ponders on how she'd thought about it the whole time she was imprisoned, why Gisker kept her alive. And when the door swung open, it finally came to her, he wanted to avenge the humiliation he suffered as a slave. And if that's the case, then what should she give him? She shifted her gaze to the side, a bead of sweat formed on her face as she declared with the last bit of strength in her that she would give herself to him. However, he just remained quiet. Then he burst into laughter the next minute as he acknowledged aloud she was indeed their family. He leaned forward, his voice dropping to no louder than a whisper as he asked if she wasn't mistaken about something. A body like hers has been thrown down and trampled on countless times, it has no value. The next words that came out of his mouth were equally shocking. He informed her the execution will be tomorrow, agreeing to let her see their faces given their past, though by then, their breath will already be gone. In the end she watched her family's execution. The whole time, her mind was filled with thoughts of how they were her family, how they are together, and laughed together when happy things happened, and they warmly parted her head, wishing for her happiness more than anyone. Her family. And even though she lived without knowing the way of the world, she knows she can't just blame Gisker entirely. But then, who was she supposed to blame? In a new scene, she smashes a vase on the ground in anger, as an attempt to keep the maids from approaching her. In that heated moment Gisker walked in, running his hand through his hair tiredly as he questioned what kind of disgraceful behavior she was displaying for a lady who was once a noblewoman. She shot back in anger, asking if he dared mention dignity after doing that. She insists he should have just made her his slave, or better yet made her die with her family, but he didn't do that. Instead he made her marry him. He remained completely unmoved, asking if she couldn't behave herself for just that day, and immediately she shot back asking if he would behave if he were in her shoes, demanding to know how he could ask her to marry the enemy who killed her family and live with him for the rest of her life. Her face twists more into horror and she mumbles about it being a curse, but he just asks if it wasn't a noble's duty to marry someone they didn't want to for the sake of the family. She insists it doesn't happen in such a cruel way, stating right now she has nothing to protect, no pride to hold on to either. She shoots into a frenzy, accusing him of just mocking her. With one last hope, she turns around and threatens to tell the Pope exactly what he's doing right now. However, before she can even take another step, he reaches out to grab her, then with his hand pressed firmly over her mouth, he warns her to go ahead and try, noting in the end, she'll marry the slave bastard she despises. He slips his hand into his bag and pulls out an iron collar. Why? Didn't you say you'd rather be a slave? Wasn't that your wish, my lady? She loses the last bit of strength in her and her body begins to tremble at the humbling realization. His revenge hasn't even truly begun yet, and she ended up being his target. The wedding of the hero king is held in Rodbrook Kingdom. All nobles and commoners flocked to the open ceremony hall, and what their eyes beheld was the praised king who rebuilt Rodbrook, and the princess of the defeated nation wearing a slave shackle. No one said a word, but everyone knew that she was not a queen but merely a war trophy from the destroyed Farnborough. The crowd shared a similar view. Looking at that pathetic sight was degrading. A queen who is a slave. She became the laughing stick of everyone all day long, and she knew she'll probably suffer even more torment in the future. She forced herself to look onto the bright side. Gisker seems to despise her body, so there will be no need for her to sleep with him. She heard the door to her room slam open, and as she slowly got up, all she could manage was a faint, "Why?" He replied in a calm voice, asking if it wasn't only natural for a groom to spend the wedding night with his bride, or was it that she couldn't stand the thought of sharing a bed with a slave? The next moment, he pulled the blanket aside, muttering a careless apology before saying she might as well get used to living like this. Fighting back her tears, she bit down hard on her lip, her body trembling as her voice came out barely above a whisper. She turned her head to the side, pleading for him to take the collar off her neck, but instead what she got was a painful jerk from him. Then biting down hard on his lips he switches into a painful confession. He admits he used to imagine it, what it would be like to touch her hair properly, what scent it would have and how soft it would be. But turns out it smells disgusting. His hand moved over her chest, then in one swift motion he tore off her dress and pulled her into his arms before moving to kiss her. She grabbed onto his shirt, her hands trembling as she struggled to breathe, but he didn't seem to notice. She placed a hand over her mouth, asking herself if it was always supposed to hurt like that. If it was meant to be so painful. Inside she was in turmoil, she was begging him to go easy on her, but some part of her questioned if he'll even listen if she says it. She concluded on her answer really quickly. No, he wouldn't, because that was a punishment. Outside her thoughts, he kept whispering her name, addressing her formally as my lady. While she questioned if he kept addressing her so formally to mock her. To her, everything was just too overwhelming, unsettling and scary. The next time she woke up, she was laying in bed alone. She quickly sat up, the whole situation replayed in her head seemed so unbelievable she could only manage a painful laugh at her pathetic situation. And to the side while she coughed uncontrollably, Xiker stood, his gaze still as cold as ever. She opened her mouth to speak, revealing she thought she was alone, but he only took one glance at her trembling hands before letting out a sigh of disgust and turning away. Her first night was cold from beginning to end. As if Xiker has decided to truly make her suffer, he deliberately surrounded her with hostile maids. Her enemies scattered everywhere, not even bothering to hide their hateful stares and mockery, and she was powerless to do anything within it. Xiker threw her away into that hell and was always away at one battlefield or after another. He would always hold her just before he left for the battlefield and after he returned. And once the act was over, he would coldly leave her. Even so, the reason she cannot refuse sharing a bed is because, the more he embraced her, the more it would seem as if she was receiving his favor. That was the only shield that could protect her in that hell. And just like that, for years had passed before she knew it. Color drained from her face as she heard his familiar cold voice once more. I hear my queen is very picky. Especially lately, they say you've grown even more picky. Is it always like this when I'm away from the palace, or is it that you fight only when I am here? She tries to speak, but his cold voice cuts her off once more, ordering her to eat. Her eyes lingers on him as the thought of how her body's been weak lately, so she's just been falling asleep later, but even if she said she had no appetite, he wouldn't listen anyway. She recalls how he'd spread rumors about her shabby clothing before and forced her into lavish dresses. Even now, as she raising the form to her mouth, she thinks he's tormenting her, saying she's become fussy with food. But before she could even swallow the meat, something shot through her. She dropped her fork to the floor while the maids ran around trying to clean up the mess she made. They seized the opportunity to slander her even more, dreaming mockery as care by advising her to have endured it a little longer, even if what the king gave her had made her feel nauseous. Just as she was about to confront the maid, his voice came cold. He announced that he will make sure they never eat together from then on. With that he turned away, leaving her standing, her mind consumed with how that wasn't her intention at all, but still, she knew it too well. Even if she explains, nothing will change anyway. In a new scene she gets the most shocking news of her life. It's been roughly 12 weeks. You are pregnant, Your Majesty. No one congratulated her because the rumor that the Queen of Rodbrook despises the king was already widespread. She dismissed everyone present, and after they took their leave, she sat alone with the unreal feeling that there was a child in her belly, her child. It felt strange that there is life inside her stomach. It was fascinating and wondrous at the same time. But most of all, it's horrifying. A child was created between she and that monster. That she ended up bearing that bastard's offspring. That day, she cried all day while hitting on her own belly. Although she could have hurled herself against the hard corners of the furniture, or even taken an abortion pill to get rid of the child, for some strange reason, she just couldn't do it. Later, a gathering to celebrate the queen's pregnancy was held. And the host, Lady Levian, praised as the virtuous noblewoman who shelters the pitiful queen of a defeated nation. But in truth, she was a woman with a snake-like tongue. Though she was her only maid, she behaved as if she were kind to the queen, but in reality, she constantly left her isolated. Now, she questions aloud why the queen is looking at her that way, confirming if she thinks she put something in her tea. The noble women present immediately shot to defend her. They called her out, accusing her of taking things too far, asking what the lady could possibly have done. They accused her of taking her cautiousness too far. After all, it was Lady Levian who arranged the celebration. With the criticism, she lets down her guard, thinking, with so many people there, surely they wouldn't openly harm her, but she couldn't have been more wrong. The cup slipped out of her hand and she dropped to the ground coughing, while Lady Levian stood in front of her, her lips curled into a slow smile before a soft mocking laugh escaped. Later, Gisker rushed into her room, his face beaming with excitement, his usual coldness now replaced by an unfamiliar warmth. He brought up the news of her being with child, but before he could go further she cut him off, claiming it's gone. A chilling silence quickly filled the room and Gisker, still in shock, could only manage a single, "What?" She crashes out unexpectedly, her composure shattering in seconds as she repeats that it's gone, repeatedly asking if he was hoping to see a child from her, a Farnborough slave. She held her trembling hands to her chest as the pain shot through her. She couldn't understand why he was looking at her like that when she's the one who was the most confused right now. She hadn't even decided whether to love or hate that child, she couldn't bring herself to choose. But just as her thoughts began to spiral, his familiar voice came for the first time, and it was devoid of warmth as usual. "Don't tell me, are you saying you got rid of that child yourself?" Her gaze lingered on him, his eyes, completely devoid of any warmth, holding not even a single shred of expectation for her. But even someone like him would at least avenge his own child. She clung to this fragile hope, as she confessed that Lady Levian had poisoned her. The next moment, the scene transitions to the grand throne room, while Lady Levian kneels before them with her tear-streamed face, voice shaking with disbelief as she questions aloud how she could possibly harm the Emperor's child, the royal bloodline, in front of everyone. The noble ladies immediately hurry to her defense. They insist it's impossible for her to have committed such an act openly, adding that not a single person who attended the tea party gave poison to the queen. Then she speaks again. This time she acts even more pitiful as she admits she knows the queen has always held deep-seated hatred towards her, but to use their child as a way to plot to get rid of her, isn't that far too cruel? Then suddenly she turns everything around. This time she accuses her of staging everything. She gets up slowly as she confesses that she had originally intended to let the matter pass unspoken, but for the sake of her honor, she will reveal it. She raises her hand signaling for a man to be brought in as she explains how a few days ago Sir Alcio captured a suspicious person in the royal palace. Moments later a man is brought in, a bead of sweat settles on his cheek as his voice shakes with disbelief. He asks why the queen would suddenly go back on her word, bringing up how she promised to spare him. Without wasting any seconds she delivers the final blow, declaring that man had sold abortion pills to the queen. The king immediately freezes, his expression almost unreadable, but the next minute he snaps out of his daze and turns to the culprit, his jaw tightening, making his veins more visible. A wave fear crashes over her as her eyes meets his gaze, and again she hurriedly denies ever doing such a thing. He goes silent first as if to process everything, then he quickly regains control, switching back to his familiar coldness as he casually mentions she wouldn't harm her own body. Besides, how would a mother possibly kill her own child? Levian quickly cut in, insisting it's a lie. This time she mentions they have clear evidence. The queen wanted to get rid of the child, and so, she harmed her own noble, royal, body. I only heard that it was such a terrible fate as one of her maids, so you can just check it yourself, Your Majesty. He lowers his head, his voice barely above a whisper as he orders everyone to leave, all except the one who sold the medicine. Later, Gisker rises, his gaze fixed on the lifeless body sprawled across the floor, when her voice cuts through the silence, sharp and deliberate. No. He lifts his head slightly, questioning what she meant, and she insists she hadn't killed it, but his response is a sharp reminder of how she tried to. He makes a sharp turn, as he painfully noted. Whether you killed or didn't kill. Either way, you wanted the child to die. My lady is truly, honest, to the point of being annoying. Why? Did it disgust you to carry the monster's child? He asks enraged. Do you know how much I waited for that child, that's why you. A light scoff escapes his lips as he calls her a foolish girl, saying all she knows how to protect is that foolish pride of hers. Again, she insists she really didn't kill it, but before she can finish he cuts her off, claiming even if it wasn't her, she couldn't protect it, not even that one small child. Suddenly she explodes, all the questions she had long buried erupting at once. She demands to know if he ever once gave her the strength to protect anything. She mentions he never even treated her like a proper wife, so how could he rage over losing a child? You abandoned me like a dog, and what did you ever expect me to protect? She lashes out, calling his expectations absurd. When? She asks, had she ever said she wanted children? Why did it always have to be her who suffered for everything? Did he truly imagine they could raise a family together? She reminds him that she never once called his revenge unjustified, she had accepted it, endured it, always, and now he dares to speak of a child, asking if he meant to play house with her. Wasn't the reason you did that to me every night to cause me pain? You're supposed to enjoy my suffering. That's just how you are. She concedes bitterly that he's right, it was horrible. It was horrifying to know his child had once been inside her. She screams that she doesn't want it anymore, living with him has become so unbearable, she feels she'll lose her mind until he suddenly utters a name that freezes her where she stands, Alexa. He asks if that wasn't the name of her younger sister, the one who had been there when she was surrounded. His tone is calm, almost casual, as he explains that Alexa wasn't worth keeping as a hostage, so he sent her away, to a place barely worthy of being called a territory, yet, he adds, it still lies within the borders of the Rodbrook kingdom. Her breath catches as she demands to know if he's threatening her, and his response is a sharp yes. Rage consumes her, and she strikes him hard across the face. A glint of defiance stirring within her as she calls him a vile, disgusting monster. But he only smiles, that same twisted grin curling at his lips as he murmurs that she's no different than a mother who killed her own child. In a new scene, Levian suddenly greets the queen. Congratulations. Confused, she asks her what she's talking about, walking into her room without a single word and then congratulating her, and she responds casually that it's simple, she's merely congratulating on her liberation from the empty title of queen, because she's carrying the king's child. Her head instinctively snapped toward her, her lips managing only a simple, what? While Lady Levian laughs in the distance. Levian tilts her head, eyes glinting with amusement as she mocks her, telling her to look at that stupid, dumbfounded face. Diana Brienne, the fallen princess of Farnborough, she calls before confirming if she'd really thought she would live a normal life after daring to make the noble king her slave. She calls her shameless, then declares that she'll continue to live like a parasite, crawling beneath the ground and wishing for death. Lastly, she finishes revealing, now she will take that seat, claiming she's sat too long in a place that never suited her. Then, as if her mockery wasn't enough, she assures her she wouldn't ever drive her out, adding that the king said he wouldn't send her away from the palace. However, she stopped listening to Levian's taunts for a while, rather her mind was filled with thoughts of how after losing her child, she almost had no contact with Gisker. Also, in society rumors quietly spread that she was the one who killed the child, so she hadn't attended state events for a long time. Also, it turned out Alexa had already died, so she was alive, but not truly living, and now she watched the murderer of her child, who now carried her husband's seed and was pregnant, so, should die now. She silently assured herself that it's okay to die, she has no other choice but to die, so she should just die, until a familiar voice came, asking her to step down from the balcony. She simply asks why, then she casually mentions that the years they've known each other for have been excessively long. She continues, mentioning how it's been well over 10 years since they got married, and it's truly been sickening. Revenge, yes, revenge, that obvious and disgusting thing, but I couldn't help it, it's a fact that my country and family humiliated and tormented you, the prince. She ponders on everything silently. She's aware he hates her and there were times she was frustrated by his revenge, but why? She recalls Lady Levian's words, on how the king was so gentle with her, how he would whisper to her every night, that he had no intention of using a slave's womb to continue the royal bloodline, especially, how much he regretted taking her as his queen. Now, she wonders why it felt her last foothold was crumbling at that moment. Letting go of the past and looking forward to her end, she lets herself fall back from the balcony only to feel his hand tighten around her wrist. He merely calls that a cute act. With a twisted grin he asks how she dares attempt to run away from him, declaring that he will never let that happen. He pulls her back up, then as he settles on top of her, he demands she's going to have to tell him why she caused that whole mess. Her lips curl into a faint, defiant smile before she spits out her refusal, her voice cutting through the air as she calls him a monster. In the same breath, she drives a hidden needle from her ring into her own skin, and a thin line of blood splatters across his chest. His eyes widen in horror, a weak no escaping his lips. Quickly panic grips him and he shouts for the guards, demanding they bring a physician at once. He gathers her into his trembling arms and through her fading breath, she murmurs that she regrets everything, that she ever saved him, that she ever freed him from his restraints that day. Tears spill freely down his face as he clings to her, his voice breaking with desperation. He begs her not to speak, assuring her that he understands, she doesn't have to say anything more. His pleas grow frantic as he calls out her name, tells her not to leave him like this, first calling her Anne, then correcting, switching to a whisper, "No. Diana. God, please." And she, as her consciousness slipped away, she pondered one last time on the irony of everything. Didn't he say he would throw her away, that he regretted making her his queen, but then, why? Why is he crying so sorrowfully now? And though she doesn't know what's what anymore, she promises to forget her child. If someone like her, who was even qualified to be a mother, remembers and cherishes you, won't you be unable to leave? But that woman who killed you and this man who didn't believe me and embraced her, I will hate and despise them to the very end. The scene transitions quickly to a man urging his kids to come down for a minute. They all rush to greet him happily, however once his daughter's excitement for her father quickly fades into horror as soon as she steps down completely. "This father has brought a gift for you."